Now, my favorite part of Diablo 2 Resurrected is hunting those incredibly rare items that really just knock your socks off when you eventually find one of them. And one of the biggest accomplishments in my book is completing a holy grail. That's where you try to find every single unique item in the entire game. Some of these items are astronomically rare to find, but how actually rare are they? Now that's what we're taking a look right here today, the 10 rarest unique items in all of Diablo 2 Resurrected. First of all, I gotta explain the methodology, or how exactly I came to determine what are the actual 10 rarest unique items in the entire game. You can't just go with anecdotal evidence. So I went ahead and took advantage of Silas-Spin's drop odds calculator to go ahead and look up how rare these items actually are to drop. But unlike a lot of people have done in the past, I'm not just gonna go ahead and click on Bale and look up how rare the items are to drop specifically from Bale. Now, Bale's drop odds are gonna be different than the odds of actually finding it in areas that people actually farm. Nobody spam farms Bale in order to get good gear. It takes like 3 minutes to do a run just to get to Bale in order to kill him. But how do people actually get those super rare uniques in Diablo 2? You actually go out to 85 areas and kill the unique monsters and the champions, just hoping to get one of those super rare uniques. The good thing about the uniques and the champions, if you look up, we'll say uniques, for example, almost all of the unique monsters in all the 85 areas have almost the exact same drop odds for almost all the uniques. So that's what I went ahead and looked at today. I went on the Silas-Spin's drop odds calculator, just put in 300 magic find, roughly an average amount that an endgame magic finder would have, and looked up what the drop odds were for some of the rarest uniques. Now, I will mention I went with these 85 areas because you can find every item in the game there, but I did not include terror zones because that just kind of throws a wrench into the whole situation of what I'm trying to do here. Also, I will note I'm not going to include items like the Stone of Jordan. It is actually incredibly rare to find, rarer than a lot of these items on this list to find in hell difficulty. But if it's an item that you can go back and farm in normal or nightmare difficulty and have a way easier time to find, that's not making the list. Now, coming in at number 10 on this list is a set item for the Necromancer, and that is Dark Force Spawn. Now, how unlikely are you to find one of these? Well, the drop odds from a random unique in one of these 85 areas is going to be 1 in 90,838. Now, starting off this list, we're almost at 1 in 100,000 kills, and that's a pretty rare number if I don't say so myself. Now, Dark Force Spawn goes on the offhand for the Necromancer, but a lot of times it kind of gets overshadowed by the Spirit Shield, and I do fall into this type of situation a lot. But Dark Force Spawn with the ability to roll with 3 to each of the skill trees can be a great option to throw on those Necromancers. Now, number 9, we're looking at a go-to back in the day for things like the Fury Druids or things like Zeal or Paladins, and this is Shaer's Hammer. Now, the odds of finding one of these from a random unique monster is 1 in 108,500. So we're already tipping over the 1 in 100,000 mark. Now, like I said, back in the day, back before the overpowered rune words, this was a go-to on a ton of melee characters. Once again, it's kind of an item that gets overshadowed by a new rune word, and that is the Grief, obviously. But Shaer's Hammer still holds a place in a lot of our OG hearts. Now, next up is one that actually surprised me when I looked up the drop odds. Now, this is actually an amulet, but it's not the one you're probably thinking of. That is Seraph's Hymn. Now, the drop odds for this unique amulet are 1 in 120,805. Now, this is actually one that the odds shift around slightly. Some are 1 in 112,000, some are 1 in 120,000, but this does fall firmly in that 7th spot. Seraph's Hymn is a amulet specifically for the Paladins, but this is another one that kind of just gets overshadowed by other items, so it's not used really hardly ever. A good Tuta Paladin FCR type of caster amulet is going to beat this out every time. Or people a lot of times will choose something like Mara's Kaleidoscope, much more common to find, and people really would much rather have that all resistance that comes on that. But let me know down in the comments if you're shocked by this. You can look it up on Silas-Spin's drop odds calculator for yourself if you don't believe me. But yeah, Seraph's Hymn actually pretty rare. Now, coming into number 7, this one's not going to be a shock to be on the list, but some people might think it should be a little bit higher. But after actually looking up these drop odds from unique monsters here in 85 areas, next one coming in is Mang Song's Lesson. Now, this one is actually another very great option for the sorceresses, but as is the case a lot of times nowadays, it's overshadowed by a lot of the more overpowered rune words nowadays. Because the staff takes up 2 hands, You could throw on a Heart of the Oak on one side, a Spirit on the other, and most people would prefer that, including getting a Heart of the Oak and a Spirit is way easier, takes way less time than trying to find yourself a Mang Song's Lesson. Along with being way easier, obviously you can get a ton of hit recovery on your Spirit Shield, a bunch of resistances on the Heart of the Oak and on the Spirit Shield, along with a ton of other things. Mang Song's Lesson is well known as being one of the rarest items in the game. So coming in at number 6 here is an item that a ton of people have as one of their last few items left on their Holy Grail, and that is Antrian's Iron Ward. This one comes in at 1 in 130,741. This is one of those items that really, since the beginning of time that I'm aware of anyways, no one actually really used this particular item. It's one of those ones that's super incredibly rare. You kind of just hunt it for the Holy Grail. It's just kind of cool to find when you do find it. But generally, people don't ever actually use this item. And as far as I'm aware, never did. Feel free to let me know any different down in the comments. Now we're at number 5 here. And here's another item for that Necromancer. And we're taking a look at Deathweb. Now from one of these random unique monsters, we're looking at 1 in 131,046. Now this item, unlike a lot of the ones on the list before this, is actually an absolutely go-to. It is best in slot god tier for those poison necromancers. This thing has so much minus poison res on it. The difference between having one of these and not having one of these is literally, it feels anyways, like a 100% boost to your damage. If you're rocking those Poison Nova Necromancers, there's other things you could use, yes, that would work, but there really is nothing that comes close to having yourself a D-Web while you're poisoning all those monsters. Now number 4 here, and this is actually a ring that took me an awfully long time to find, and it's one you definitely want to get your hands on, and that is the Whis Projector. Odds for this is 1 in 145,549. Now I didn't realize it was so high up on this list, but that would make more sense of why it took me so long to eventually find one. But man, you absolutely need to have that lightning absorb here when you're getting out. Maybe you're going after Ubers, more specifically Uber Mephisto. This Whis Projector, throwing it on your smiter, can be the difference between life and death, or just make those Uber runs way more smooth. Now at number 3 here is actually another one that kind of surprised me. Now don't get me wrong, I knew it was rare, but I didn't think it would fall at number 3 on the list when you're out there farming up for these champions and uniques out in like the pits and the Chaos Sanctuary and things like that. But for this one, we're taking a look at Stormlash. This one's drop odds from these random unique monsters in 85 areas is 1 in 159,902. This one definitely was used quite a bit back in the day, and nowadays it is used sometimes on certain builds. Now the main thing along with this Stormlash is that you have a chance for static on striking, which actually can chop down a large chunk of health from a large group of monsters. AoE damage is hard to get for melee characters, so depending on some niche builds and things like that, Stormlash is sometimes used today, but really not all that often. It quite often gets overshadowed by things, like I said before, for melee characters, that grief. Now number 2 on this list, we're getting close to the number 1 spot here, but right now we're taking a look at a unique amulet. You probably know what this one's going to be right here. This is Metal Grid. Odds of finding this off of one of those random uniques in the 85 areas, 1 in 182,708. Now Metal Grid is one of those items that's incredibly rare, but essentially almost never used. There's only one use that I literally ever found for, and that is now that Diablo 2 Resurrected did a little bit of a change to where your Iron Golem will follow you along as long as you keep that Metal Grid on your character. So with the Metal Grid, you can go ahead and use those Iron Golem charges, make yourself an Iron Golem out of like something like an Insight, and it'll actually stick with you as you go through games. But this thing almost never survives, so really, I mean, this is some super crazy niche use if you really want to babysit your Iron Golem. Now coming in at number 1, and this is going to absolutely blow you fellas' minds. Well, actually, it's totally not, because it's the exact item that you're expecting it to be. This is the one item I have left on my Holy Grail, and that's Tylar's Might. Now the drop odds for this are roughly 3 times worse than the item in number 2. And for Tylar's Might, we're coming at 1 in 452,682 unique monster kills before, on average, you're going to find Tylar's Might. Now, once again, we're going to go along with a very common theme on this list. This item is not used really ever. It's essentially useless. The only purpose for this item is it's incredibly rare, and it always, not literally, but essentially is always the final item left on people's holy grail lists. So this really is the ultimate chase item. You're really just chasing it to complete that list and to get that accomplishment. So hopefully I get lucky enough to find one of these in the not so distant future.